Good afternoon, everybody. Buenas tardes a todos. Welcome to the first meeting of 2024 for the Portside Community Steering Committee. Bienvenidos a la primera reunión de 2024 del Comité Directivo de la Comunidad Portside. We'll give it a few seconds for folks from the public to join us. Le daremos unos pocos segundos para todos para reunirse con nosotros. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Gracias a todos por reunirse con nosotros. At this moment, I'll be handing the mic over to one of our wonderful interpreters, Isabel, who will be providing instructions on how to access interpretation in English and Spanish. Isabel?
Yes. Muy buenas tardes, mi nombre es Isabel, yo soy interpretante de español. Voy a dar las instrucciones en español primero. Si tiene una tableta para ingresar a la reunión, ponga los códigos que ya se han indicado y en la parte de arriba va a haber unos puntitos, ahí puede elegir, a veces viene un globito y a veces viene la selección de qué idioma va a elegir. En este caso tenemos inglés y español. Elija el español y así va a oír toda la reunión en español. Si tiene computadora, a veces viene un globito y viene indicando también los idiomas inglés y español, elija el español y así puede oír también a través de su computadora el español. Si tiene tableta, es más o menos el mismo procedimiento. Es siempre elegir el idioma para que pueda oírlo en español. Good evening, my name is Isabel. I'm the Spanish interpreter. And here is more or less the way you can join the meeting. You already received a link with the ID number, so you can log in through Zoom and get, if you have a tablet, you will see 3 points where you can select the language. It will be in Spanish and English. So you select English to hear all the meeting in English. If you have the computer, you will see a little globe where you can select also the language. It will be English and Spanish. So you select English and you can hear the meeting also in English. And you have a telephone. Also, you will see three tabs where you can select also language interpretations, and you will select in between English and Spanish, and you select English. If you have any questions, you raise the little hand that is in the bottom, so you can ask the question, and they will select when you can ask the question. Thank you.
Thank you, Isabel. Muchas gracias, Isabel.
Sorry.
At this moment, we'll have the interpretation channel launched. So it should be available at the bottom of your screen. Ana, could you confirm that the Spanish interpretation is coming through clearly?
Yes, it's working on my end.
Perfect, thank you. Next slide, please. Once again, we just wanted to welcome everybody to the new year and excited to see such great attendance today for the Portside Community Steering Committee. We have a busy agenda today, a pretty data-heavy agenda. So we did send some presentations, I think all of them ahead of time, just so folks can have a chance to look at them and I'm prepared to ask questions for our presenters today. At this moment, I'll hand over the mic over to my colleague, Ana, who will go over the agenda and meeting objectives.
Thanks, Shui, and good evening, everyone. So for today's meeting objectives, first is to learn about the California Air Resources Board's Air Toxics Assessment Data Portal, as well as the results from the 2019 data collection project, and then followed with an analysis and interpretation of the Portside Community Environmental Justice data. The next objective, you'll be receiving an update from, and as well as a chance to provide feedback on the San Diego Association of Governments in San Diego and Imperial County Sustainable Freight Strategy. So as Shui mentioned, today we have a pretty packed agenda. So after we go over roll call and general updates, we will go over the approval of last meeting's notes as well as tonight's agenda. Next, we will preview the California Air Toxics Assessment Data Portal, followed with the presentation on the results from the 2019 data collection project within the Portside Environmental Justice Neighborhoods. Then we will have another presentation on the Portside Environmental Justice Neighborhood data, looking at the analysis and interpretation. And then our last presentation will be on the San Diego and Imperial Counties Sustainable Freight Strategy. And then we will close the meeting with public comments and closing remarks. So with that, we'll go ahead and move on to a review of the meeting agreements. So as a reminder, for the meeting agreements, first is to create a space for everyone to contribute. Step up if you're more on the quiet side, step back if you've had a chance to participate. A reminder that we can only have one person speak at a time, as well as listen to each other, respect each other's opinions, knowledge, and perspective. Given that we do have a packed agenda, you know, being conscious of time so that we're able to end the meeting on time. And then lastly, just a reminder for speakers to please speak slowly and clearly for our interpreters. So next we'll go over to roll call. Let me just pull this sheet up. All right. So first we'll start with Keith.
Here.
Thank you, Keith. Ms. Shelby also here? No?
Shelby's my alternate, so whenever I'm here, she won't be here.
Sounds good. Jack?
Yes, I'm here. Good evening.
Good evening, Jack. Thank you. Sarah?
I'm here, thank you.
Lydia, is Lydia here as well? No? Okay. Next we have Leslie.
Leslie is not here, but Phil, the alternate, is here.
Okay. Tim?
I'm here. This is Tim. No Mariella tonight.
Thank you. Nick?
Hi, everyone. Yeah, I'm here.
Thanks, Nick. Martin?
This is Joy, I'm here too.
Sorry. Thanks, Joy. Martin? I'm not seeing Martin. David? Is David here? And also got the message that Massey is here. Thank you, Massey. Roman?
Good evening, buenas tardes, this is Roman.
Thank you. Miss Sophia also here?
Hi, yes, I'm also here.
Great. And then seeing that David is also here. Thank you. Dr. Stephanie, you?
I'm here.
Thank you. Jose?
I'm here.
Thank you. And is Diane here as well?
I'm here.
Thank you, Diane. Nick? Nick?
Yes,
Creedy?
I'm here.
Thank you. Miss Sergio here as well? Not seeing Sergio. Dinah?
I'm here. Liana is not here.
Great, thank you. Filomena? Janice?
I'm Janice's alternative. You can put me as Adrian Demirs.
Okay. I'll make that note. Thank you, Adrian. John? See John. Hillary? I see Hillary. Alicia?
Presente.
Gracias.
Perdón.
Margarita?
Aquí estoy.
Gracias.
I'm here.
Yes. Naomi? Naomi. Let's see. Vanessa?
Here.
Thank you. Salvador. Thank you. Montserrat.
Presente.
Gracias. Silvia.
Yes, good evening, present.
Thank you. Good evening. Ashley.
Present.
Thank you. Josephine.
Present.
Thank you. And last, Maritza.
Present.
Thank you. All right, and with that, we meet quorum for today's meeting.
Great, thank you so much, Anna. And I just wanted to share some quick updates for the full steering committee. As you all know, Liliana has been our representative from CARB for a little over a year. We have a new representative from CARB who moving forward, who is Adriana Hernandez, who will actually be providing the first presentation item today, and will introduce herself then. And then we do have a new primary representative from the US Navy, who is Nick Critty, who is an expert on air quality issues, and excited to have you join us. Thank you both for your work and for joining the Portside community. I also wanted to remind everybody that the 2024 meeting calendar has been posted on the Portside Community Steering Committee website. Meetings are continuing on the 4th Tuesday of the month at 5 p.m. with the second meeting of the quarter being in person. So next month we plan to join in person in National City, and we'll provide more details on that meeting closer to the date. Thank you, everybody. Moving on to the next agenda item. We wanted to open it up to the steering committee for consideration of approving the meeting notes from November 28th, which was our last formal meeting, as well as tonight's agenda.
This is Maritza. I move to approve the minutes and the agenda.
I second.
Thank you, Maritza. And thank you, Josephine, for the note. Was the second from you, John?
Yes.
Thank you. Great. Is there anyone opposed to the motion on the floor to approve November meeting notes and tonight's agenda? Hearing and seeing no hands up. Thank you, everybody. So the notes and the agenda have been approved. Now moving on to our next agenda item, we wanted to hand over the mic over to Adriana Hernandez to introduce herself to everybody and give us a preview of the California Air Toxics Assessment Data Portal.
Hey, thank you, Chuy. So hello, everyone. Like Chuy said, my name is Adriana Hernandez, or Adri, and I am an air pollution specialist with the Office of Community Air Protection, also known as OCAP. And we are the division within CARB that oversee the implementation of Assembly Bill 617. And I will be replacing Ms. Liliana Nunez temporarily as your CARB liaison, who has received a well-deserved promotion. So I'm excited to be here with you all today. The next slide. Are the slides up? I can't see the slides right now, Trey.
Yes, the slides are up.
Okay, this is for my view. Got it. Okay, so today my colleagues will be updating you on monitoring efforts within your community, but before we dive into those updates, we wanted to inform you about the California Air Toxics Assessment Portal, also known as CATA, which is an ongoing comprehensive evaluation of air toxics in California. And it's acting as a vital link between national assessments and regional evaluations. The California Air Toxics Assessment is designed to support various CARB programs, including Assembly Bill 1807 and Assembly Bill 2588, also known as a Hotspots Program, and AB 617, as well as environmental justice programs. So the California Air Toxics Assessment Portal also complements the existing monitoring networks, and it supports our CalEnviro Screen tool as well. It's conducted once every 3 years, and this high-resolution statewide assessment enables trend analysis. And so far, modeling for both 2012 and 2017 base years have been completed, and we're currently working on 2021. Next slide, please. And here is a snapshot of the California Air Toxics Assessment results. On the left, our map displays the cancer risk in 2017 across California, identifying high-risk areas, particularly around transportation hubs and the dense urban zones. And the figure on the right illustrates changes in cancer risk from 2012 to 2017, highlighting significant variations across different regions and a decreasing trend of risk over the time statewide. And the data portal also enables us to zoom into different air basins, counties, and communities, including AB 617 communities like the Portside community, and it reveals sharp contrasts in risk near busy roads and ports, and even the effects of cross-border pollution in places like the International Border Community and the Calexico El Centro Harbor in Imperial County. We'd like to note when interpreting the California Air Toxics Assessment results that it is strongly recommended that users should view them in relative terms, such as risk percentiles instead of absolute values. And the reason for this is to understand that data within the context of broader environmental and health measures. So they are part of a comprehensive toolkit that should guide the decision-making process. And it's crucial to not just rely on them as a whole or sole basis for making these decisions. Next slide. To ensure that California air toxic assessments data is easily accessible to all Californians, CARB has developed a user-friendly data portal with rich content, clear communication, and adherence to open data principles, which means you can download our data and our comprehensive technical reports and also watch tutorial videos. You can access the portal through the link provided. And if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to contact the CATA team via email at CATA, that's cata@arb.ca.gov. And just thank you for your attention today. And we look forward to supporting your efforts to better understand and utilize CATA's data, contributing to a healthier and more informed California overall. Thanks, Trey.
Thanks so much, Adriana. We have time for maybe 1 or 2 questions. And we can come back to the tool after the other presentations as well, since they're all related to each other, if I understood correctly.
I have a question.
Yes, go ahead, John.
At what point do we take, if you will, the hard data and do something with it above and beyond just numbers? I've got a meeting coming up 1st of February or so, and I'll be contacting, if you will, all of the politicians here in California, to the degree that we need to do more for the people that we serve. And I understand that we've got issues and the numbers are important, but you know, and I've said this many times, we've got people that need help right now. And they're, you know, I was talking with my doctor just the other day, and he goes, well, they just need to get a recommendation from their doctor that the expense for the equipment that they need is a medical necessity. And they can write it off their taxes. They can get it for free in some cases. But gosh, we really need to do more. Thank you.
So, John, I don't work with the CATA modeling unit, but I will put their email in the chat so you can ask any follow-up questions if you can. But in very broad terms, how we can utilize data that we have in our monitoring software is what I've seen and how we utilize it is like first how I mentioned we support the Kellen virus screen tool. Another way that we've seen it used is by concentrating and analyzing risk assessment in certain areas. And it also helps us target specific programs to areas, and it helps us develop basically sort of like backing up our claims and our data when we request for certain actions to be taken in certain communities. But I think there's a wide range, and I think there's a lot of experts here today that will say there's a lot of ways we can use data and numbers that we've collected throughout the state. And so these are just at the top of my head, the couple that I've seen. But yeah, if you want more examples of how you can utilize the data, I can connect you with the right people over here at CARB. So I will put my email on the chat as well, so you can follow up with me as well if you want some further ideas on how to use this data as well.
Well, that's wonderful. And if at some point someone can say, yes, the problem in the communities and whatnot does affect the health and whatnot of many, would help the doctors to be able to say, yes, they've got the numbers and they've got the verification that the pollutants in the air are toxic. Oh, I hear a baby wanting to get in on the conversation.
Great, thanks, Adriana and John. So just in the interest of time, we'll go ahead and move along. And then again, if there's any more questions, feel free to save those, as all of these are intersect with each other. So next we'll go ahead and move along. So we'll have another presentation. So I'll hand it over to Mohammed, I believe. And then I'll be posting the link to the Spanish slides shortly as well.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. This is Maxim Islam, an AI research engineer from the Air Quality Planning and Science Division at CARB. So today I will present the automated license plate readers, that is LPR study, in the Portside environmental justice community. Next slide, please. Yeah, so this is kind of the outline of my today's talk. So at first we'll briefly cover some background on vehicle emissions and impact model. Then we'll discuss how the ALPR system can improve the fleet characteristics assumptions. And finally, we'll see an application of this system in the Portside community. Next slide, please. So first we'll discuss the background about vehicle emissions. Next. Yeah, so as you may know, the emissions from vehicles can be of different forms, but in this slide, the pictures show the emissions that coming from the vehicle exhaust, kind of the common type of emissions that we see from vehicles. Note that the vehicles can have exhaust emissions when they are running, also when they are idling, as shown in the right figure. Next slide, please. So in this slide, I will discuss how we develop community emission inventory, more specifically, how we actually estimate the vehicle emissions. To estimate the vehicle emissions, we need a wide range of inputs or data. I can categorize them into three main points as shown here. So the first input is the fleet characteristics, basically meaning that what is the fleet makeup? Is it light duty versus heavy duty? What fraction are diesel trucks? How old are these vehicles? We can actually use county level data, but the question is, are they representative? So in this regard, I want to emphasize that our data collection efforts via the ALPR systems were aimed at checking these county level fleet characteristics assumptions. See, the next input that we need to estimate vehicle emissions is the vehicle activity. So that's like how much they operate within our community, how many miles they drive, and how many hours they idle. We can use data from Metropolitan Planning Organization, MPO, and other data sources like telematics service providers. And finally, we need to know how many grams of pollutants they emit per unit activity. So we get these estimates through extensive laboratory emission testing from the lab. Next slide, please. So in my previous slide, I discussed the three main inputs that we need to estimate emission. Among these three inputs, I'm just focusing the fleet characteristics aspect here. And we'll discuss how we can better know about this. So one way is to use vehicle-specific data collected within communities to refine A, the fraction of light versus heavy-duty vehicles, and B, the model year or the age distribution of vehicles. Now the question is, what is the benefit of this data collection? Well, when we have this data, we can use this data to validate and refine our on-road vehicle emission estimates in MFAC model. In my next slide, I will discuss what is MFAC. Next slide, please. Okay, so the MFAC is an emission model. So I previously discussed that we need an array of inputs to estimate emissions. So an emission model actually gathers all these necessary inputs, processes those, and finally provides us the emission estimates. This is how it works. So this MFAC model was developed and used by CARB to assess the emissions from on-road vehicles, and thus it supports CARB's regulatory and air quality planning efforts. Since we know what MFAC is, I want to point out the current source of the fleet characteristics, one of the inputs that I discussed earlier in our current MFAC model. So right now, there are two main data sources for this input. First one is the California DMV data. This is like for all California registered vehicles. And the second one is the International Registration Plan, this IRP data, for out-of-state vehicles but traveling in the state. The main strength of this data source are they are very comprehensive and includes every currently registered vehicles. However, note that they have limited information about where the heavy-duty vehicles are actually traveling. And in this regard, the LPR system actually can mitigate these limitations that we will discuss in next slides. Next slide, please. So now we'll see how this LPR system can improve the fleet characteristics assumptions. Next slide, please. So here you can see how this ALPR system works. It basically detects and digitizes the license plate data and then provide us two very useful information. First, the license plate number and the location of registration, that is the state and country. You can also see that it provides us the confidence that it has on the reporting this data as shown by the last two numbers on each line. Next slide, please. So the license plate data that we get from the ALPR can actually give us lots of useful information. So like it can actually help us to gain further insights on vehicle and travel characteristics to better assess pollutant emissions. So when this license plate data is tied with vehicle registration data from DMV, a couple of useful information can be extracted, like the gross vehicle weight, for example, whether it is heavy duty versus light duty, the model year, or the age and the fuel type, like is it like diesel driven or gasoline driven, something like that. And thus, the LPR system can corroborate and improve MFAC fleet characteristics assumptions. Next slide, please. Okay, so now we'll see an application of this LPR system in this Portside environmental justice neighborhood community. Next slide, please. So this data collection project was a collaboration between the San Diego Air Pollution Control District and CARB. So these data were collected with temporary LPR system in summer 2019 in the blue circles shown in the right map, except the location 10. I should note that in this project, we only were able to process the California registered vehicles. So the overarching goal was to corroborate the current emission inventory assumptions, that is, the fleet mixes and model year distributions from MFAC San Diego County registration data. Next slide, please. Okay, so here we'll see some results from the data. And first, we'll focus on the fleet mix. So in this slide, you can see two figures. So first, focused on the left one. Here, the x-axis represents vehicle categories based on weight types, based on vehicle weights. So an example of light duty vehicle is like our car, and medium duty is like pickup trucks, and heavy duty vehicles like heavy duty trucks and buses. The y-axis here represents the percentage of vehicle under each of these vehicle categories. So you can see there are two different colors are used here. So the greenish color represents the LPR data that we collected, and the orange bar represents the data from MFAC 2021 for San Diego County. So in general, you can see the LPR derived light, medium, and heavy duty breakdown compares pretty well to our MFAC 2021 model. Now move to the right figure. So in this figure, we try to explore a bit more to know about what was happening in terms of fleet mix within the heavy-duty vehicle categories. So here, we took a subset of heavy-duty vehicles, that is the heavy-duty trucks, and divided it into two classes, heavy-duty trucks and medium heavy-duty trucks. And you can see that the LPR results suggested a larger contribution of heavy-duty trucks to the overall heavy-duty truck population. The reverse is true for medium heavy-duty trucks. Next slide, please. So in this slide, we are focusing on the model year distribution. So here, the x-axis on the plots are chassis model year instead of the vehicle categories as shown in the last slide. So you can see three figures, and from left to right are for light duty, then medium duty, and then last right one is for heavy duty vehicles. Like before, the green line represents LPR, while the orange line represents the MFAC 2021 distributions. So yeah, so you can see that the LPR derived medium and heavy duty vehicles are newer than predicted by MFAC 2021, and which is kind of encouraging because like the newer fleet means improved after treatment system, less deterioration, meaning lower emissions. Next slide, please. So in this slide, we represented our collected data in a different way to understand the vehicle travel pattern a bit. So these are basically the heat maps showing the location of registration of the vehicles operating within the community. So the left one is for light duty vehicles and is divided into zip codes within the San Diego County, while the right one is for heavy duty vehicles and divided into counties within California. So now, if you look at the left map, you can see that 30% of light duty vehicles are registered within the community and 83% registered within the San Diego County. Assuming these vehicles travel from where they are registered, there is a lot of county travel to the community, especially for registration addresses that are within a 25-mile radius. Now, if we look at the right map, you can see 22% of heavy-duty vehicles are registered in the community and 57% are registered within San Diego County. However, as you can understand, there are a lot of heavy-duty vehicles registered outside the county traveling to this community, especially from Los Angeles and San Bernardino counties. This demonstrates that trucks travel often far from where they are registered. It also helps community members understand vehicle activity and emissions are coming from vehicles that are registered outside of their community, which may have different characteristics than those registered locally within the community area. This highlights the limitation of only using registration data to understand fleet characteristics at higher spatial resolution, like community. Next slide, please. So now, the conclusion and next step. So overall, the community fleet mix and modular distributions are found consistent with MFAC 2021 county level data. We observe larger heavy-duty fraction, meaning higher emissions. However, we also observed newer fleet, means less emissions. So if we think about the overall effect, the diesel PM was found, or the impact is kind of lower than what was predicted in MFAC 2021. And for NOx, the effect is kind of neutral. Another important observation was a significant fraction of travel from vehicles registered outside of the community. As the next steps, we will analyze the LPR data from other CARB projects in other AB 617 communities. And finally, we try to improve the future MFAC versions to better capture local scale activity and emissions. Next slide. So this basically concludes my presentation today. Feel free to ask any questions you have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mohammed. We'll start with a question in the chat from Jose, then move over to folks who have raised their hands. So I see Joy. So starting with Jose's question in the chat, do you have any data of trucks registered in Mexico?
I can help answer that question, Maxim. So hello, my name is Sarah Forestieri, and I'm a manager working on MFAC, and Maxim works on my team. I did answer the question a little bit in the chat, but I can kind of expand a little bit. So we do not have registration data from Mexico, but as far as I know, and I've kind of heard this anecdotally, and also we have collected some ALPR data at the Calexico border, and many of them seem to have like dual plates, like both California plates and Mexico plates. But we are only able to like get information on the vehicles that have, or the plates that are California. And so we can match that to a database, but then we don't know if those vehicles are also registered in Mexico because we just don't have access to the Mexican registration data.
Thank you, Sarah. Moving on to hands raised, Joy.
Yeah, thanks for that presentation, and really for doing the study. That is more information than we had before, and it is something that seemed important, back when the study was started. I noticed that the information is on unique trucks, and I guess I'm thinking that we need to know of the trucks that are doing frequent trips through the community. What are the years of those? I think without that information, it'd be hard to draw conclusions about, whether the net effect is plus or minus as far as the amount of diesel emissions. So that was one comment. I also had a question. I was wondering if we have any estimates of how many trucks we're missing because they're not registered in California. For example, a lot of the trucks going to National City to pick up cars may be registered out of state. Thank you.
I
Joy, thank you for the comment and the question. And I do want to emphasize that this was a collaboration between CARB and the Air District, and they put a lot of work into this project as well. So I also want to kind of highlight that. I think we did look at, this overall picture if we count, all the trucks together. And I think the results are pretty similar, or painted a similar picture. But that's something we can, dig into a little bit more just to confirm. And then, yeah, the district processed the license plate data, and I think we're only able to get access to the California vehicles. And so that that is kind of, yeah, missing. And I'm not really sure how many out-of-state trucks would be operating in that community, because they do, contribute a significant amount to populations and vehicle miles traveled in the area. So that is one limitation of the study.
Thank you, Joy. Thank you, Sarah. Next question from Jack.
Yes, thank you for that that presentation. I'm just wondering in a very simple way, if you could explain what the benefit is to someone who resides in the Portside community of knowing where the registered trucks are actually registered, and what benefit and what's to come out of that? What can you share is important for this study and this information you've provided? How is it useful?
Yeah, that's a great question, Jack. Thank you for asking. We wanted to look at like travel characteristics just to better understand the data, because we were, kind of surprised that the vehicles were like, at least the California registered ones, which is what we have data for, were newer on average than what we had predicted from MFAC. And so, as Maxim kind of pointed out, MFAC is based off of registration data primarily, and there's some reallocation of certain truck types, but registration data is like, kind of our main source. And so we know which vehicles are registered in, San Diego County and their characteristics. And so that's kind of what is used to inform, the county level San Diego model year distributions for those vehicles, and like, the distributions of those heavier trucks versus the, the lighter trucks. But when we saw that big difference, or the ALPR data suggested something different, then we're like, why is that? And so that was, looking at those maps and seeing that there's like a good percentage of vehicles coming from like Los Angeles, for example, or San Bernardino County, kind of helps us understand that, there's a lot of trucks traveling from outside of the community into the community. And that's maybe why we see something kind of different than, MFAC, which is just based on the registration data. Because trucks, as we've seen from the study and kind of know, they travel very far from where they're registered. And so this study, I think, really illuminates that, that aspect.
Thank you, Jack. Thank you, Sarah. I see Nicholas has the hand raised.
Hi, Sarah. Hi, Maxim. Thank you for the presentation. I have just kind of a general question, clarification question on how ALPR works. So I understand that you all have your data is kind of limited to California registered vehicles. In my mind, it kind of functions like it's like just a camera shooting pictures of these license plates and gathering them. Just because we don't have the like gross vehicle weight and the model for non-California trucks, does it mean that we might still just have random license plates from trucks from Illinois or from other parts? Or does the camera just not take pictures of non-California registered trucks? I'm just trying to understand how it works.
Yeah, sure. That's a great question, Nicholas, and thank you for asking it. So license plate readers kind of work by taking video footage of vehicles operating on the road, and then there's software that kind of like detects like that this is a plate, and then it reads the characters, and then kind of based on like the pattern on the plate, it kind of infers where like the plate registration state. So it can tell if it's a California plate or a Nevada plate. And we did get that information from the ALPR system. But in order to get data like gross vehicle weight rating to see if it's like a light duty or heavy duty vehicle, or like model year distribution and so on, you have to basically map to some registration database. And to my knowledge, I think the district was only able to get the California registered or the California DMV information. There's a separate database that we use at CARB called the International Registration Plan. So any vehicle that kind of does like interstate travel will be kind of registered with that plan. And so we can get characteristics from that database for the out-of-state trucks. It's just, I think for this project, the district didn't have access to that data source at the time. So we weren't able to get information on those vehicles, but any other ALPR data we collect like through CARB, we would be able to match the out-of-state plates.
Thank you, Nicholas, and thank you, Sarah. I see a new hand raised from Femi.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, hello, good afternoon, everyone. I wanted to jump in. Sorry, my name is Femi Lalaway. I know I haven't been on very many meetings, but I wanted to just add in on the conversation a little bit. So just for introductory purposes, my name again, Femi Lalaway. I'm chief of the community planning branch here. So also in OCAP, I'm one of the chiefs here that runs our grants and incentives programs and oversees our liaisons here as part of our program. I wanted to weigh in here on the ALPR perspective outside of the perspective of I'll say characterizing data and understanding the effects that data can have in providing information. I want to weigh in on the perspective of enforcement as well as that intersection of how we look at this data from a perspective of the emission reduction programs and the monitoring that you guys do, and how you access the program from your perspectives. I want from the perspective of enforcement, as someone who worked in enforcement for a couple of years, one of the things that was always a challenge for us is understanding how to capture these particularly heavy duty trucks that are going in and out of communities that are in and out of compliance, particularly those that are out of compliance. As some of you may know, these heavy duty trucks have different license plates on the front of the truck than on the back of the truck. The trailers are often different than the actual truck owner who has a license plate in the front. So the ALPR is actually very helpful for us in understanding who the actual truck owner is. So it's been very helpful in helping us actually enforce a lot of the vehicles that are coming in and out of neighborhoods. So it's very impactful for communities that are really looking for help and assistance in providing additional enforcement support in communities where we know that there is some non-compliant trucks going in and out of neighborhoods. So there is a nexus to that as part of this process. So I do want to raise that as something that is impactful when it comes to this particular technology. Also, when we talk about the meaning, why it's meaningful to know which trucks are in or registered in these communities, when we think about solutions to replacing these older, dirtier trucks, you want to know, should we be replacing trucks, or what trucks in our communities, and what impact is that going to actually have, and how much? Because if you're talking about replacing a number of non-compliant trucks in your community, you want to know that makes up this many trucks or this much emission reductions, because it's this many trucks or this amount of trucks in our community that's causing these emissions. So if you know that a certain percentage of trucks is actually more coming from different communities or different parts of the state or different parts of the country, you want to factor that in to how you're looking at making those types of decisions for your community. So it's important that you have as much information as possible. I really like the idea of our folks coming back and continue to refine this data and refine how it's looking at our modeling so we can be more and more precise about how it's capturing all this information, because again, it just makes our tools more and more effective, and it allows us to be more and more informed in how we make these decisions. So I do think it's very critical in helping inform you all. Earlier in the conversation, we were talking about, what does this tool mean in terms of how I can, inform my physicians and how to impact my health and make decisions about my health. To me, these tools are how we kind of engage that intersection of providing where tools meet decisions and actions. This is how we engage that intersection. This is where tools meets actions and decisions. So it's really helping us be more and more informed so that we can have these conversations with you all and say, this is what we think is happening. Like, how do we move forward with what the best course of action is for your communities? So this type of information is kind of how we do it. It's just making sure that we are all in shared understanding of what the information means, and we're all communicating it clearly with you all, what we think we're seeing, and we're in agreement with you all and what you think that means as well. So I wanted to provide another perspective on what the Alper tool is doing. Again, as someone who worked in enforcement and was on the freeway trying to capture license plates while trying to drive and not hit other people, I can tell you it's a critical tool for a multitude of reasons. So I wanted to just, again, throw that out there. Hopefully that's helpful, but if not, please let me know. You can throw in the chat. I don't want to take up too much more of your time, but I just wanted to at least throw that perspective out there. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Femi. Any more questions? Jack, I still see your hand raised, but maybe that's from earlier.
Right, that's from earlier. Sorry about that.
Any other questions before we move on to the next presentation? Seeing none.
I have mine raised.
Hello?
I
Sorry.
have mine raised.
Sorry, John, I don't see your hand raised, but yeah, feel free to ask your question.
Okay, I totally agree with the gentleman, Femi. Yeah, every little bit counts. My thoughts are like on the freeway here. I live across the street from the freeway, and there are hundreds, if not thousands, of trucks moving north and south and whatnot, and then there's the other section out here where they take off onto 94, all within our community area. And how would you keep track of that? And I guess going back to my original comment, if we already have health issues with our present level, the rest of the stats here are just going to show that we're actually dying from all of this very quickly, faster than some people think. But I thank you. I think that any kind of progress we can get in determining which vehicles are polluting and whatnot, and especially down at the border, we get a lot of vehicles coming across the border. And but thank you.
Thank you, John.
Tree, I have one
Nicholas?
more quick question. So sorry. Sarah, Maxim, would you all mind moving back to the map of where the cameras are? I just had a question on it looked like some of them were on the terminals. I think like number 8 looks like it's on the marine cargo terminal, and maybe I can't make out the numbers are a little small on mine. Is 3 on the National City Terminal too?
Yeah, so these locations, and it's been a while since I've looked at exactly where we collected data. So, but I think they were, streets really close to those terminals where trucks were operating. We had to be able to set up these cameras like on the sidewalk. So I don't think we were in the terminals, but I think we were on roads very close to them, from what I remember.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Nicholas. John, I see your hand raised. Is that from earlier? Thank you, John. Great. Moving on to our next presentation is Yanju with us today? Yes.
Yes. Thank you. Shall I start?
Yes, please.
Okay. So good evening, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity for allowing us to share the results from the data analysis and interpretation we have conducted for the Portside community. I'm Yanju Chen. I'm a manager here of the Community Air Quality section as the Air Resources Board. So first, my team manages Community Air Quality Data Portal called AQView. AQView provides access and visualization of all the AB 617 monitoring data to the communities and to the public. And we also work with the district to assist the communities to analyze and interpret air monitoring data so we can help to get a better understanding of the air quality and exposure levels in the neighborhoods. So first, I would like to appreciate all the comments and support we have received from the CSC Monitoring Subcommittee when we had a meeting with them early this month, and the San Diego Air District, and as well as multiple groups as a resources board in developing this presentation. Next slide, please. So first, just to start with, the pollutants we're focusing on for this presentation. We'll be primarily focusing on the diesel particulate matter and volatile organic compounds. Like, as we all know, there are many potential sources for diesel particulate matter. They're primarily from diesel exhaust from on-road heavy-duty trucks, off-road mobile equipment, truck refrigeration units, construction equipment, and stationary sources. In this study, what we did is we estimated concentrations of diesel particulate matter by the black carbon concentration data measured by the district in the communities. So as you all know, there are 5 sites in the Portside community that the district are currently collecting black carbon data for. And also for the volatile organic compounds, the potential sources are port businesses, vehicle exhaust, and industrial activities. There are 4 regional toxic monitoring sites in the San Diego County. One is located in the Portside community, which is at Sherman Elementary School, and the other one is very close, which is located at Chula Vista. So from the map on the right, you can see those 5 black carbon monitoring sites where we used to estimate diesel particulate matter concentration, as well as the 4 sites for volatile organic compounds. And I also want to mention that the data analyzed are from existing monitoring efforts from the districts, and there's no additional monitoring conducted by CARB for this presentation. Next slide, please. So there are some questions we would like to answer, and hopefully we can provide some useful information to you. The first question is, where are the areas with high air pollution levels? How does the concentration measure at different sites compare with each other? And the second question, we really will want to identify and quantify the potential risk associated with air pollution. The question we're trying to answer is, what are the risks associated with this diesel particulate matter and some of the volatile organic compounds based on the monitoring data? And I want to see the information presented here is very consistent with the information you have heard from the district, like during their quarterly updates. our analysis and results are just focusing on longer period of time, while as a district they are presenting quarterly updates to the communities. Next, please. So before we start analyzing the data, we want to really assess the quality of the data and make sure we can provide accurate and meaningful results. So while we got all the black carbon data from the Portside community, from the aforementioned the AQView data portal, the data has been assessed rigorously by the quality control checks we have developed for AQView. Like there are 4 different perspectives. We look at the upper and lower limits of the data to see whether they fall into the reasonable range as identified by the manufacturer of the monitors. And we check whether there are abnormally high or low numbers. And then we also check whether there are constantly repeating numbers during a certain time period. The good thing is that after our quality control checks, and more than 99% of the data, the black carbon data collected by the district of very good quality. So we move ahead with our data analysis with this data. Next slide, please. So just getting a little bit more talking about diesel particulate matter, how are we going to estimate, how can we estimate the diesel particulate matter concentration from black carbon concentrations data? From the previous presentation, you may have already heard from, the diesel particulate matter cannot be measured directly. So we use this black carbon as a surrogate to estimate the concentration. And the factor we are applying in our project is we assume 1 gram of black carbon is roughly equals to 1.3 grams of diesel particulate matter. This is a conversion factor recommended by the California Office of Environmental Health and Hazard Assessment. They gave a presentation to the CSC back 2 years ago, exactly 2 years ago, talking about health risks for different types of pollutants. And so this way it provides rough estimation of diesel particulate matter based on 2 major assumptions. First, we assume there's 70% of diesel particulate matter is black carbon. This fraction is known to vary in different studies, and the number we are using here is specifically from a scientific publication listed here from 2013. And also another assumption we're making is we assume all the black carbon particles in the ambient air are from diesel emissions. This assumption is not entirely true, right? Because there are a lot of sources could contribute to black carbon, not only diesel emissions, but it kind of provides a worst case scenario. So then based on this factor conversion, we can use this to estimate the concentration of diesel particulate matter and further understand the health impact, including non-cancer and cancer risk caused by diesel particulate matter. Next slide, please. So first, let's just quickly look at generally a yearly average concentration for diesel particulate matter in the community. Again, there are 5 sites. We did an average from July 2022 to June 2023. We didn't start from the beginning of the calendar year because the Boston Avenue site, the monitor of the Boston Avenue site didn't start in January. So we tried to do data from July 2022 to June 2023 to make sure we can include as many sites as possible for our comparison. And so in the graph, it shows the 4 different, the yearly average concentration of diesel particulate matter for these 5 sites. And also the red dashed line indicate it's called a chronic reference exposure level, which is 5 microgram per cubic meter for diesel particulate matter. And you can see that the concentration of diesel particulate matter ranges from 0.65, which is at Sherman Elementary School, to 1.01 at Boston Avenue. And also all of these numbers are below the chronic reference exposure levels. We would like to point it out that this only represents the non-cancer impacts. We all know that the concentration levels can still have a significant cancer risk, and we'll discuss about cancer risk later in the presentation. Next slide, please. So you may recall that like there is CARB also presented some results from called the health risk models for the toxic pollutants, including diesel particulate matter for the community, like in May 2022, a year and a half ago. That was like kind of a different study based on modeling approaches and using the emissions from 2017. Here we're just trying to do a quick comparison between the estimated diesel particulate matter from our monitoring study and also the modeling results you saw like a year and a half ago. So the map presented on this slide, it shows a comparison between the estimated diesel particulate matter and this model diesel particulate matter. The circles indicated the 5 sites, with monitoring data available. The different color, like indicate the different concentration levels. And also like the colors on the sensors block kind of indicate the modeled diesel particulate concentration. Although these two approaches are very different, the years the data represented are different, and also the estimation methods are different. But we want to point out, like both the estimated results and the model results do show a very similar variations in space. We're seeing higher levels near the coast and lower levels in inland. Next slide, please. So after diesel particulate matter, let's just move to the volatile organic compounds. I mentioned there are like 4 sites in the county. There are like 1 site, Sherman Elementary School in the community, and the 1 site, Chula Vista, which is located very close to the community. So we'll be focusing on the results from these 2 sites. I want to point out that there were like some data missing during the pandemic because of the COVID stay-at-home order. So we're not able to collect monitoring data at those periods. Next slide, please. Oh, sorry, not next. This I just want to mention this is this is very different from the black carbon monitoring the district I presented earlier. Basically for the volatile organic compounds, it's not a continuous measurement. So basically you take all these kind of like canisters as a picture shows on the bottom left, and you collect some ambient samples, and like based on certain frequency. In this case, it's 1 in 6 days in Sherman and 1 in 12 days at Chula Vista. And then you bring all of these samples back to the lab. It kind of use a more complicated and advanced instruments, analyzer, trying to inject the samples into the analyzer. And then you will get some results regarding the concentration levels of different types of compounds from this ambient sample collected in the canister. Now, next slide, please. So this shows the 4 major organic or volatile organic compounds: benzene, toluene, isobenzene, and xylene. We call it BTEX. This shows the data from Sherman Elementary School and Chula Vista. And again, here we have a red line to indicate the chronic reference exposure levels, and we have a black line to indicate the 8-hour reference exposure levels. The main findings from here is like regarding non-cancer health impact, and all of the BTEX concentrations were below the available reference exposure levels. But we do know benzene and isobenzene may cause cancer, so their cancer risks are discussed later in this presentation. And the isobenzene concentration at Chula Vista were all below the detection limit. So basically mean, we couldn't detect it from the samples. And that's why you don't see any orange bars for isobenzene on the bottom left for Chula Vista. And in general, we're seeing like a BTEX concentration showed a winter high, summer low seasonal pattern. And I also want to mention the other 2 sites. One is Alcohol Lexington Elementary School, and one is Otay Mesa. In the county, we did see very similar concentration levels for BTEX at those 2 sites as well. Next slide, please. So besides BTEX, we analyzed another 21 major volatile organic compounds from the total of 56 collected in the sample. These are the compounds that mainly, come emitted from the urban areas, like some toxic compounds. We find out like concentration of most of these toxic compounds, they were below the available reference exposure levels for the non-cancer impact. There is one exception, is acrolein. Acrolein concentration were above the reference exposure levels for both 8 hours and chronic level at both sites at Sherman and Chula Vista. And the potential sources for acrolein are from mobile vehicle exhaust, wood burning, cooking, oil burning, cigarette smoke, and also, it could be potentially be formed by other compounds in the air. But I also want to caveat that there is a major challenge of measure acrolein in the air. It just because it can easily to react with other compounds and form a different compound. So it's difficult to capture and measure acrolein accurately in the ambient air. So the more work needs to be done to really accurately quantify acrolein concentration in the ambient air. And I also want to mention that also, we're seeing that, most of the toxic compounds were below the available reference exposure levels. We need to conduct further analysis to really understand what are the cumulative impact from all of the compounds, in addition to just compare individual concentration levels of individual compounds with their reference exposure levels. Next slide, please. So let's move to another part talking about the cancer risk of all of these toxic compounds, including diesel particulate matter and those toxic volatile organic compounds. So what is cancer risk? By definition, it is a probability of developing cancer if a person was exposed continuously to a toxic air pollutant over a lifetime. So, but it does not mean it will happen or indicate when a person will develop cancer. And our estimation for the cancer risk from the monitoring data in the Portside community are conducted following the procedures below. We're calculating the cancer risk based on the annual mean concentration measured at a Sherman Elementary School. Again, that includes diesel particulate matter, which is converted from black carbon concentrations, and the concentrations from volatile organic compounds. The results of cancer risk, our estimation are expressed in chances per million people. For example, a cancer risk of 1 in 1 million means that in a population of 1 million people, not more than one additional person would be expected to develop cancer as a result of the exposure to a certain toxic air pollutants. And the way we're doing cancer risk analysis is use CARB's risk assessment standalone tool. And also this tool, it follows the risk assessment guidance from the Office of Environmental Health Hazard Assessment. I just provided a few links here, in case you're interested to learn more details about the assessment method. And also we do have some general information about health risk assessment at CARB's website, which is the third bullet listed below. Next slide, please. So what have we found out? We did for 2 years, we calculated cancer risk for the different compounds at Sherman Elementary School for 2020 and 2021. So some major findings. First, we find the overall risk decreased by 20% from 2020 to 2021. And we also want to note that, there are a lot of reduced activities during the COVID pandemic that may affect this, the 2020 and 2021 levels. So that's why we want to continue estimation for future years as the data become available. Again, based on the results, we can find the diesel particulate matter is the largest contributor to cancer risk. And among all the pollutants we have analyzed, among all the pollutants that are monitored and we have analyzed, we did find there are a few more that have cancer risk greater than 10 per million. They're all listed in the graph on the right: carbon tetrachloride, benzene, 1,3-butadiene, acrylamide nitride, and Nestlane. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Oh, yeah, thank you. So then this is a detailed comparison by looking at different compounds, these major toxic compounds, how their cancer risks got changed from 21 to 2020. So if you are seeing a negative number, which means the risk in 2021 is lower than 2020, and if you're seeing a red and positive number for acrylonitrile, which means the risk were higher. We're also listing some potential sources for this major cancer-causing pollutants. There more work needs to be really conducted to really understand what are the exact sources for the community. Next slide, please. So earlier today, you saw a presentation from CARB regarding CADA, the preview of CADA, because CADA is also presenting cancer risks for communities and for different areas in the state. We just want to see, provide a little bit more information on, what is comparison with what the data you see from CADA early on. First, I want to caveat this is not really a direct comparison, just because the two approaches are very different. When we do a very preliminary quantitative comparison, and we were able to compare diesel particulate matter, benzene, and 1,3-butadiene, and you can see the numbers are fairly close with each other. They are quantitatively very similar. Next slide, please. So that kind of concludes my presentation, some major key takeaways, and referring back to the two questions we would like to answer at the very beginning. First one is, what are the areas with high air pollution levels? Diesel particulate matter concentrations were high near the coast. Monitoring data showed it was high at a marine terminal. And the monitoring data using the monitoring data to estimate diesel particulate matter concentration from black carbon data, it was also high at the Boston Avenue site. The second question we're trying to answer is, can we identify or quantify potential risk associated with air pollutants? We'll see major toxic volatile organic compounds except acrolein were below existing reference exposure levels. The cancer risk estimation showed diesel particulate matter to be the greatest contributor, and we're also seeing cancer risk decreased by 20% from 2020 to 2021. Again, we will keep doing more analysis when data are available to study the long-term trend of the cancer risk in the community. Next slide, please. Before I conclude my presentation, I just want to provide some of the ways you could access the data that we presented today, in case you're interested in it. So first, if you would like to access black carbon data, you can access them from AQView. My team actually developed this system to manage all the community air monitoring data. And if you go to the website listed on the right, or you can scan that QR code to get to our website, you can see actually provide a pretty easy access and visualization of the air quality data from different sources. And also, if you would like to access volatile organic compounds data, you can access it either from CARB or from the district. Next slide, please. Now we plan to continue our data analysis and just provide more useful information to the community. So first, we want to present data analysis and interpretation results for other pollutants. We did have some results for black carbon, again, which was very similar to what district presented before, but we also did look at the PM2.5 data, PM10 data, and some of the metals data, either collected in the community if the data were available, or near the community if we don't have any sites in the community. And we plan to update the current analysis when new data become available for our cancer risk results. And also we would like to explore the potential and possibility for source attribution, see what are the sources contributing to PM2.5 and volatile organic compounds in the community. We'll start with evaluating the quality, whether the data are good enough for such analysis, and we will report back to the community when we have some results. Next, please. That concludes my presentation. And again, thank you for the opportunity for allowing me to present our results. I would very much to hear your questions and if you have any suggestion on how we should conduct our future data analysis, please feel free to let us know. And again, if you want to access the data, please visit our website for AQView. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Yanju. See, we have a couple of hands raised already with some questions or comments, starting with John.
Yes. Sherman Elementary is part of the San Diego Promise Zone, which I also am part of. And have you contacted the principal and some of the medical staff there in regards to your findings and whatnot?
That's a very good suggestion, and no, we haven't. So we're just we talked to the district, and we kind of like we're first one to share the results with the CSC here, before we have any further actions. But if you feel like there is a need, we can definitely work with the district, work with the school principals to share our findings with them.
Yeah, I would definitely think that would be appropriate. And there's several other schools here in the Promise Zone also. I mean, I work with 10 of these schools that are part of the Promise Zone, and many of them are literally just on the other side of the freeway from me. So I would really, really suggest that we put them in the know, and but thank you. I really appreciate you guys looking to accomplish this.
Of course. Thank you so much, John. Yeah, thank you so much for your great suggestion. We'll definitely move forward, working with the district and again, working with the CSC to, share our results with more community members so they are aware. And I'm glad we're helpful.
Well, and the other thing I would suggest, I was elected to the City of San Diego Barrio Logan Planning Group. Possibly you would like to come and give a presentation there. I mean, that's right there at Chicano Park at the museum. And I think that would be very helpful.
Of course. Thank you, John. Yeah, if you could please help us make the connections, we are happy to present.
Most definitely.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Great. Jack?
Thanks, Joey. Hi, Anju. Thanks again for another good presentation tonight. I think you introduced some new data, which was very interesting. I think most people on this planning group or on this committee have no doubt that for many years there are issues of emissions in the community. So you asked what we might suggest with regard to the use of future data, the use of future energy and resources to look at things. I would strongly suggest the source attribution that you mentioned. It sounds like that may be way off, that may be way down the list of priorities, but it seems that while it's clearly established, and you established it again tonight, that there are emission issues in the community, it would be really helpful to know where they're coming from or how will we ever address them.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jack. Yeah, I completely agree with you. When we talk about air quality, right, when we look at the concentration data, we're always wondering, where does it come from, right? Why the pollution is so bad in area, and what are the sources? How can we really mitigate, control the sources and to mitigate the air pollution? It will definitely, that's what I mentioned, we definitely want to explore the possibility looking at source attribution. I would caveat, source attribution, one way of doing it, it just requires a lot of data or a lot of good quality data. At this moment, I'm not 100% sure whether we have collected enough data for that part of analysis, but again, that's definitely something we will look into, and then we can report back to you and see what we find out. And also I want to add, since I was doing comparison with modeling results here, and Jack, you may be already aware, like for the presentation CARB's modeling team provided a year and a half ago, they look at the data, like the air quality in a different way, right, with a modeling approach, but they were able to kind of like, separate some of the sources based on their approach. So I hope there are already useful information there. But again, we're from a monitoring perspective, we definitely want to take a closer look at on the monitoring data and see what we can do regarding attributing sources.
That would be very helpful. I think it's so frustrating in a way, because we've got, as you look at the locations of those monitoring sites, you've got one located right at the intersection of a freeway, which is showing very high emissions. And then you've got one out on the end of the 10th Avenue Marine Terminal, with the prevailing wind patterns that move west to east. And so there, you wouldn't expect there is freeway impact or freeway sources for those emissions. So where are they coming from? I mean, that's just it would be so nice to have some more information and insight into that. I think if we're going to continue to tweak our emission reduction plan and make sure it's going to be effective in the years ahead, and come up with some realistic goals.
Sure. Thank you so much, Jack. Yeah, we'll definitely work with CSC and work with the air district and see how we can really help answer some of those questions.
Thank you, Yanju.
I also have another suggestion too. Coronado, for instance, is just like a point or so behind Barrio Logan. Well, having been a commercial fisherman years ago, I know that just off of the shore, if you will, international waters, many of the ships going into Mexico, or for that matter, anywhere in the United States, that's where they're at. And they're burning fuel 24/7 before they go into port. And, and that explains, at least for me, as Jack had brought up, that the wind basically is west to east. Well, that's one of the reasons why Coronado is so high. And there used to be years ago a research being done as to how much pollutants were being brought in, from other locations. For instance, up north, when the winds blow from the north to the south, they bring it down here. When the winds blow from the south to the north, everything down in Mexico is being blown in. And then towards the afternoon, around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the wind starts blowing from west to east, and it blows everything right down on Coronado and right across the bay. So
thank you, John.
Once again, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, John. Thank you so much for the information.
Great. Any other questions or comments for Yanju? I see something in the chat. This may be far-fetched question, but do we know how far someone has to be safe from these toxins? And is there something that you suggest these people can do who live there to protect themselves right now?
That's a really good question. Unfortunately, I wouldn't claim myself as a health expert to answer that question in this regards. But first I want to caveat, the toxics data we are looking at here is only from one site. It kind of represents the area for the elementary school, but it doesn't. It cannot cover the entire community. So I'm not quite sure whether I would be able to make a recommendation for, the community members, in different areas of this community. And there are things I think the district has been working with the community a lot, try to protect the community members. Something I can think about would be indoor filtration if you need to, and trying to remove some of the toxics, and if we have a better understanding of the sources of the toxics, we can, as Jack mentioned, we can really reduce from the the source level. But this is a really good question, and unfortunately, I'm sorry, I probably don't have a very good answer at this moment. But there are like different groups working at CARB regarding health impacts, and I can definitely reach out to other groups and see whether I can get a better answer for the question from Janice. And again, Jenny, thank you so much for your question, and I'll find more information for you.
Thank you so much.
Last little question for the Ms. Chin here. There is currently equipment that we know will clean the air before it comes into your home. The different air filters that we have in the buildings are great, but the problem is all of this material is now on your clothes, your kitchen, everywhere in your building. Okay, now mini splits, for instance, clean the air before it comes in your building. There are other units that fit like an air conditioner, okay, that goes into your window, and they also have filter systems that will clear those contaminants considerably before they even come into your structure. And this is one of the things that I really feel strongly with, and I'm working with a couple of different manufacturers of these products because we can get those products approved for medical needs. So once again, get your information or my information from Chewy, and let's work on this thing.
Thank you so much, John. Yeah, I will make sure to reach out to other CARB teams and see to get as much information as possible for this question. And we will report back to the CSC here and see what we can find out.
Great. Thank you so much, Yanju. At this point, I think we're a little running behind, so would love to move to our next presentation to give Tim the time to present on the sustainable freight strategy. Tim?
Great. Yes, thank you. Okay. So good evening, everyone. My name is Tim Garrett, Regional Planner with Sandag. This is an update on the project, the San Diego and Imperial Counties Sustainable Freight Implementation Strategy. Last presented this to the Portside Community Steering Committee in July 2023. And so just providing an update on the things we've been working on as we're starting to wrap up the project. So next slide, please. So background and kind of purpose of this project, recognizing that freight is really essential throughout the region and has a really important, significant role in daily lives of a lot of folks, and including probably many in the Portside community. And so we've done this project, Sandag partnering with Imperial County Transportation Commission and Caltrans to develop a sustainable freight strategy, intending to strengthen partnerships among different public agencies, reduce emissions and foster trade, enhancing environmental justice, highlighting projects that use the most innovative technology and advanced projects so that they can be implemented, and then also address workforce gaps so that we are prepared for the next wave of freight projects and infrastructure. Next slide, please. So there's a lot of overlap between what this project is trying to achieve and what the Portside SERP includes. So I'll highlight some of the goals that are some of these in common. And so we've got reducing diesel particulate matter throughout the community, increasing the number of medium and heavy duty zero emission vehicles within the community and throughout the region. Next slide, please. Providing zero emission truck charging infrastructure, completing the Harbor Drive 2.0 improvements, as well as supporting the broader truck route. Next slide, please. Increasing the number of heavy duty on-road electric trucks through demonstration projects, supporting the dedicated truck route to avoid truck impacts to the local community. Next slide. Providing truck parking and staging facilities, including those with electric charging capabilities. and supporting Harbor Drive multimodal corridor study land use proposals. Next slide, please. And last one's improving transportation efficiencies, reducing emissions from ships at berth, and promoting the adoption of zero emission technology by folks in the community. So next slide, please. So just wanted to highlight there's a few different related projects that have been brought to this community. They've been mentioned before. Just want to highlight what the role of this project is compared to others. So the San Diego Regional Medium and Heavy Duty Zero Emission Vehicle Blueprint is another SANDAG project that is pretty focused on zero emission vehicles and their associated infrastructure and getting the region prepared to implement that, that type of infrastructure in particular. Next is a zero emission vehicle charging and fueling stations feasibility study. This is a Caltrans-led study that's really building off of the blueprint and taking advantage of the siting criteria developed and looking at potential sites throughout San Diego and Imperial counties. And then the third one is Harbor Drive 2.0 Vesta Street Bridge. I assume that folks might be familiar with this one since it's one of the goals of the SERP. But that's a specific project that is kind of starting the design and right-of-way phases now after environmental has been completed. So that's a specific project related, but just wanted to highlight that this is a little bit different. This is a regional study for San Diego and Imperial counties, and it's more planning level, and it's aligning agencies to highlight sustainable freight strategies beyond just zero emission vehicles. So next slide, please. So what we've accomplished to date with this study, we developed an existing conditions assessment, identified best practices from around the region and around the world regarding sustainable freight, coming up with innovative strategies and developing a screening criteria to figure out which ones would be appropriate fits for the region. We conducted lots of public engagement, including coming here, and we got some feedback from folks last time we presented over the summer. Developed evaluation criteria to determine which types of projects would kind of rank near the top and rank near the bottom in terms of priority. And then we've developed some fact sheets for projects, programs, and policies, some key ones that I'll be discussing today. Next slide, please. And yeah, same slide here, but here's the Spanish translation. Okay, perfect. And so this next part of the presentation, if you remember from the last presentation, I got some feedback from participants in the call about which types of strategies would be most preferred. There were some projects, some programs, and policies. And so the feedback that we got in that session, as well as other forms of engagement, informed which ones we've elevated and throughout the rest of the project and continue to work on. So we've developed fact sheets for some of the key ones here. That talk about benefits, challenges, timeline for implementation, costs, and funding sources. So I'll highlight a few, try and go quickly. Next slide, please. So here's one, zero emission truck charging and parking staging areas. So with this strategy, we're really envisioning newly built facilities that would be publicly owned. So it could be an agency like SANDAG, but it could also be Caltrans, it could be a city or some other type of public agency. And there's tons of benefits with this types of project and in terms of reducing emissions by converting trucks, as well as providing resting and waiting areas, which is really important for the safety of the drivers and reducing the types of unauthorized parking that we might see in the absence of these areas. Next slide, please. But regarding some of the challenges to implementation, there's really big challenges with getting the correct amount of power to the site. There's a really complex power needs and a long lead time of making sure that upstream infrastructure is in place. It's quite expensive, and also identifying how the demand for new charging infrastructure will materialize over time has a big impact on when the infrastructure is available. And so just getting those things right and getting the coordination effective is really challenging with this. Next slide, please. Another project to highlight here is truck-only lanes. And so these would separate trucks from other vehicles on the road, so, cars and pedestrians and cyclists. And so there's a safety benefit there that folks aren't intermixing with these large trucks. But there's yeah, and that provides an efficiency benefit as well, because maybe we're reducing the eliminating the amount of speed differentials between different types of vehicles. Next slide, please. Some of the challenges are, depending on how it's implemented, potentially right-of-way acquisition needs, enforcement of these facilities, and making sure that there's actually public support for this type of project. It's not always favored, this type of project, when it could be a different type of infrastructure. Next slide, please. I'm going to move past this one, but I'll pause for comments when we get to at the end of these. So yeah, next slide. Great. So similar to zero emission, like any other type of zero emission strategy, this type of one, it's providing incentives for cargo bikes, reduces pollution and reduces the associated health impacts, but there's also great benefits for reducing congestion on streets and at the curb. And so this is really effective in kind of more urban areas where there's lots of conflicts between vulnerable road users and delivery vehicles. Next slide, please. One of the challenges with this is that it's not going to be appropriate everywhere. There's obviously wider barriers to the wider adoption of bikes within the region, and so cargo bikes are going to be subject to some of those same hurdles to getting those bikes on the road. Yeah, I'd say those are some of the main ones. Next slide, please. This one here would be developing some low emission zones, and these could be, depending on implementation, either voluntary or required. So that's really a policy decision, but providing areas where zero emission vehicles maybe have priority access to curbs, or they have reduced parking, or maybe free parking, like those types of things, that would be an additional incentive for zero emission vehicle adoption, and would provide the great benefits in folks living near or having businesses near where deliveries are occurring. Next slide, please. Challenge with this is probably administration. So there needs to be enforcement and agency that's really invested in making sure this is functioning properly, and there's a good relationship with the curb management, whether that's enforcement, like I said, or with parking compliance. And so, next slide, please. Next one here, support for private truck parking site development. So this one is similar to the first one I mentioned, but this would be the public agency maybe providing some incentives for private developers to develop some of this infrastructure on their own. And so they would provide similar types of amenities like showers, food and dining areas, and security. And so this might be especially attractive and feasible in certain areas where there's more of a market for this type of development, which would be potentially in more industrial areas, maybe in like Otay Mesa, for example. Next slide, please. The mechanics of implementing this would be maybe a little bit challenging to get right on the public administration side. You need to have the agencies agreeing on how to implement it in a way that's appropriate for communities, and also works out for the private developers so that it's a win-win. And so this might not be appropriate in all areas, especially where there's not a strong market incentive for a private developer to take this on. Next slide, please. Two more to go through here, and then I'll pause. So this one's overweight truck route planning. And so this is a policy idea to address one of the really significant zero emission freight barriers, and that's that zero emission trucks are heavier than their diesel counterparts, at least electric trucks using current battery technology. And so a fully loaded truck to accommodate a heavier battery would have to reduce the amount of goods that it can carry, reduce its payload. And so in the absence of an overweight exemption, there might be a need for more trucks on the road, more truck of vehicle miles traveled to move the same amount of goods. And so identifying where it might be appropriate for overweight trucks to travel would go a long way towards incentivizing the use of zero emission trucks. Next slide, please. But of course, a big thing to make sure that gets addressed is the cost and the safety. if we have overweight trucks, they might cause more wear and tear on the roads. And so there has to be a plan in place to pay for that extra wear and tear so that the roads can stay in good condition, that they're safe, and that we're not creating new problems as we're trying to address one. Next slide, please. And the final strategy to highlight is developing recommendations on land use compatibility. And so this is SANDAG and ICTC coming at this from a transportation perspective and recognizing that there's advantages and from a public health perspective of separating noxious land uses that have maybe a lot of emissions, either from activities happening directly inside the facility, or it could be indirect source emissions from trucks coming and going to the facility, and wanting to really separate the sensitive land uses like residential and parks and schools. Next slide, please. Challenge with implementing any sort of new land use changes is that SANDAG doesn't have land use authority. That's with the local jurisdictions. And so implementing this one, it's great to come up with recommendations, but it really requires the local authorities to implement those. And so that's one of the challenges. And next slide, please. Pause there. I've got a couple more slides at the end, but I want to see if folks have questions or comments on any of the strategies that I brought up so far, that I can try to address those before wrapping up.
Thanks, Tim. Any questions or comments for Tim?
If not, I can keep on going, and then we'll just, okay.
Roman.
Yeah, hi. Thanks, Tim, for the presentation. Really appreciate it. Just a question on the defined priorities that you outlined. Are there any there that SANDAG is going to take a lead on, potentially trying to pilot, implement? And I see like a lot of the challenges is funding. So is SANDAG planning to apply for that funding or pull in partners to help bring those resources?
Yeah, thanks for that question. One of the great things about this project is we are it's a really broad look at what different types of strategies are out there, recognizing that some types of things are maybe new technologies that maybe a pilot would be appropriate. Other ones are pretty well established in other areas. And so, we would be pretty confident they would be effective here. So this strategy and sort of the public outreach that we've been doing is we've been trying to get a feel for what types of projects are supported by different communities throughout the region. And so those are ones that we would want to prioritize as SANDAG, as an agency, when we're looking for new projects to put in our regional plan, or if we want to go out and seek funding from state and federal sources. So yes, the plan for SANDAG and ICTC is to take this, the key projects that are highest priority, and those are the ones that we want to take the lead and go ahead and try to develop them, recognizing that the particulars, some of them require the support of local jurisdictions, some require Caltrans support. So the particulars, those would need to be worked out, but we do plan to pursue the top projects.
Yeah, that's helpful. Yeah, because as you know, with the CERP, right, there's identified priorities and potential projects, right? And I could see a lot of, obviously there's overlap, but a coordination between SANDAG, the Air District, this group, right, to be able to advance some of those projects that help advance the goals and the outcomes identified within the CERP.
Thanks. Agreed.
Thanks, Roman. Any other comments or questions before Tim moves on? That's good.
Keep on going then. Just a couple more. I'll turn it back to you. Okay, so perfect. So this, the last component of what we're working on with this project is a workforce development toolkit. And so we recognize this, we included this in the project scope from the very start, because we recognize that there's a lot of projects that are new to our regions. So we've got new zero emission vehicle infrastructure coming in. We've got intelligent transportation systems that would be needed to support things like truck only lanes and curb management, different things like that. And so we recognize there's going to be a lot of new infrastructure, and we want the folks who live here to be prepared to build that infrastructure and operate and maintain it. And so we have been doing some labor market analysis, and this consists of analyzing how job postings and applicant profiles are aligned with each other, or maybe there's gaps. And so we've been looking at the different gaps between the skills requested in job postings and what the skills available are within the workforce per their applicant profiles, and that gives us like a nice snapshot in time for what the current gaps are. And then we're also looking at what the trends over time look like, how the job titles have changed and how the requested skills have changed. And that's giving us a sense of what the trends are and what might be needed in the future. We're also developing an inventory of training programs that are available throughout the region. So San Diego and Imperial counties, as well as surrounding areas on both sides of the border. And so we're developing an inventory of all the different applicable programs so that can be a resource for folks that are interested in pursuing these. And then we're also providing some recommendations. Some of these include developing modular instruction materials that the existing programs could insert into their existing curricula. So just slotting it right in where it fits. Supporting employer-based training programs for more specific competencies that are a bit more job specific. And then also having more regional conversations among different agencies within the region and with different educational agencies, educational organizations to highlight the workforce development needs and then take action to address them on a periodic basis and moving forward. Next slide, please. And so we're working on that, this toolkit, and we're also consolidating all of the deliverables completed to date into a final report. And so that'll be wrapped up in February. And so we'll be presenting that to our policy advisory committees, to our local elected officials. And then moving forward, as we go to implement some of these projects, we'll be likely coming back to the Portside Community Steering Committee and asking for support as we seek funding for implementing those, asking for your support at that time. So next slide, please. And so contact information is here. Mariela is the project manager, Mariela Rodriguez. Jose Marquez is a member of the project development team with Caltrans, and then myself, Tim Garrett. And so please feel free to reach out to any of us with further questions. And with that, thank you for your time. I'll turn it back to Chewy to see if there's any more comments or questions that I can take tonight.
Thanks, Tim. If folks have any comments or questions for Tim, feel free to raise your hand. Seeing none. Great. Well, if folks have any questions after the meeting, feel free to contact Tim with the email on the slide. Great. Thanks, Tim.
Thanks, Chewy, and thanks, everyone.
Great. Now we have just a few minutes open to any public comments that folks wanted to share or suggestions for future agenda items. Feel free to raise your hand so I can call on you or add your suggestions or comments in the chat. John?
I just wanted to say thank you. I think tonight's meeting was very good. For our first meeting for the year, I think, well, I enjoyed it. Good information, and I think we had some quality individuals who were giving the presentation. So thank you so much.
Thank you, John. And yes, kudos to our presenters for taking the time to work your slides and keep them as clear as possible for folks.
Gotcha.
Shui, looks like people are having trouble hearing the interpreter on the channels.
Thank you for calling that out. Isabel, I'm checking if we can hear you. Can one of the interpreters speak right now? Gracias, te podemos oír. Thanks, Ana. Any other questions or comments before we wrap up for the evening? Adriana, I saw your hand raised, but maybe it was the same comment as Ana's.
Yeah, no, nothing important to report.
Great. Well, I won't keep folks any longer if there's no more public comments. Thank you, everybody, to our presenters and our interpreters for a great first meeting of the year and helping just set a baseline understanding of all the data that's been collected over the years, so we can use that to inform our meetings and discussions moving forward. As noted earlier today, we do plan to host next month's meeting in person at a location to be determined in National City. So we'll be sure to send those details to everybody over email. Alicia, voy a hablar en español. Solo para terminar la reunión. Solo le quería decir muchas gracias a todos por la reunión de hoy y todos los datos que nos dieron hoy para informar nuestras discusiones para el año que viene. Y solo un recordatorio que el próximo mes vamos a tener nuestra reunión en persona en un lugar que en National City. Y les vamos a dar los datos y detalles más cerca de la fecha. Great. Thank you, everybody, and I hope everyone has a good evening. Gracias a todos, and espero que tengan buenas noches.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you,
Thanks, Joey.
everybody.
Good night.
Gracias. Buenas noches. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, and once again, thank you. Very good meeting tonight. We're off to a good start.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, Chuy.